Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe, your home for horror, fantasy, and science fiction. I'm your shopkeeper, Chris Baker, and today we've got a very interesting item. This coming from the section of our shop that deals with our machine overlords. So let's pull out the kinetoscope and take a look at the new film, Afraid. So, Afraid is one of those films, when I saw the trailer, I thought, okay, this could be an interesting idea. The thing is that I've seen this idea played out a lot of times. If you've seen the trailer, you know the deal. It's about this family who is introduced to AI in their home, and this AI becomes invasive and then ultimately tries to take over the family to a degree and becomes evil. It's evil AI against your, typical all-American family. And we've seen that before. I mean, we essentially saw that in Megan, which was a great film. I really enjoyed Megan. Looking forward to the sequel to see where they take it from there. You also saw it in that film. I don't know as if it got a theatrical release, or if it did, it was maybe a very limited theatrical release, but I watched it on streaming. I don't know if I rented it or saw it on one of the services, but Tim, that was pretty decent. It wasn't a great movie, but it was a decent movie, I thought. And then, of course, there is an episode in the last season of Black Mirror where you had this guy that gets AI brought into his home. I believe the AI was voiced by Gwyneth Paltrow. And all of these movies, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, movies and TV dealing with AI and how AI can go wrong, how AI can go evil. It just seems to be every few months we get a new one of these. And I thought, okay, this is just going to be pretty derivative of all the other evil AI things that I've seen recently. And there have been a lot more than just the three I cited. But I have to say, I went into this with extremely low expectations because of that. And when I got all finished with the film, I have to say I was pleasantly surprised. It ended up being a better movie than I expected it to be. Maybe not a better movie than I expected it to be, because I was hoping it wouldn't be a bad movie, and it wasn't a bad movie. But there were just certain things about it. I was like, okay, I know I'm probably going to have seen everything that takes place in this movie. And while there were a lot of things that have been in every other iteration of evil AI, I did see a few things that felt different to me, or it felt more real world as far as the technology, the AI technology that we have available to us right now, and the implications of that in this horror setting. So I'm going to talk a little more about this, and if you haven't watched Afraid, I encourage you to go check it out. Go check it out in the theater. If you waited till it came out on streaming, or you could, watch it video on demand, or maybe it's on a platform that you have, I wouldn't blame you if you did. But I think it is definitely worth going to the movie theater to watch it, because it was enjoyable enough that I'm not disappointed that I paid good money to go see this at all. I actually, was quite pleased with the movie. Even though it wasn't a great movie, it was still a pretty good movie. So go watch it. If you haven't seen Afraid, then come back, listen to my thoughts. But if you have watched it or you don't care about spoilers, we're going to head into some spoiler territory right now. So one of the things that made this film very enjoyable was the fact that it had a really good cast. You have this family, Curtis and Meredith, played by John Cho and Catherine Watterson. If you're not familiar with them, you would know them to see them, of course, John Cho from the new Star Trek movies. He's been in like a shit ton of movies and television. I remember watching him in that TV series Sleepy Hollow that I really enjoyed. So you've seen him around. Catherine Watterson, not a ton of things that I've seen her in. Not that she hasn't been in a ton of things, just it's usually not my fare. But I did just recently watch her in Alien Covenant, like the one Alien movie I had not seen yet, so I wanted to watch that before I went to see Romulus, and she stars in that, and a really good couple. I really enjoyed I didn't have a fantastic chemistry on the screen, but they were believable as a couple. They were believable as a mom and dad that have been together for years and, have this family and all the trials and tribulations of, him having a career and a family, her putting her career on the back burner to be a mom and be responsible for raising this family so he can go to work. And you get a lot of that tension built into the already tension of an AI takeover movie. So that was interesting. And I thought both of them played these characters really well. The kids I thought were really good. None of the kids are child actors that I'm very familiar with. Lukita Maxwell plays the oldest teenage daughter, Iris. I really enjoyed her and her story. The middle child, Wyatt Lindner, plays Preston. He has his own issues and problems with, kind of being in that tween area. And then Cal's the youngest, a little kid played by Isaac Bay, who he was just adorable. The scenes where he's talking to his mom and asks her to tickle him awake, and where he's going to bed and he asks his dad to snuggle him asleep. It was just adorable. This little kid. It was a shame that they didn't do more child in peril stuff, because he was so adorable that it would have amped up any tension if he were threatened in any way. But I really liked this young cast of children that they had. And then, of course, they had a lot of other really good actors. They had Curtis's boss, Marcus, played by Keith Carradine. You had David Dastmalchian playing Lightning, who's a part of this group that is behind the AI that's in question. We'll get a little more into that a little bit later. But he adds a level of uncomfortability. And I mean that in the very best way. He always plays these odd, just slightly off characters that are really interesting and a little bizarre, a little weird. And he just emulates that on the screen. And his characters are always so fun to watch. I always love seeing David Dastmalchian show up in any movie. After Late Night with the Devil, I hope he leads more movies, but to see him in some of these small roles in horror and fantasy and science fiction are always fun as well. But it was very interesting to see the way they handled the introduction of AI into this family. And like I said, it's nothing we haven't seen before. Very similar to Megan, very similar to Tim, very similar to that episode of Black Mirror where the marketing firm that Curtis works for Marcus, is taking on a new client that is producing this AI kind of at-home virtual assistant, essentially. And there again, it's nothing we haven't seen before. But I like the fact that once the AI called Aya is introduced into the home, I really enjoyed the fact that they took it down a road where this AI is insinuating itself into this family's daily life, and it begins out in helpful ways. There again, nothing we haven't seen before. And then some of the things quickly become a bit more sinister. But I like how it became sinister in real world ways. In the case of the daughter Iris, she is taking dirty pictures of herself and sending them to her boyfriend. And her boyfriend and his buddy are using AI to kind of deep fake her onto a dirtier video and ruining her reputation that way. And AI, kind of helping her to resolve the problem. I think you see that in the trailer, but going to extremes to resolve the problem, essentially killing the boyfriend with his, virtual electric car. That was really interesting. An interesting way to take a real world problem, especially these days with the ever advancing, it's advancing daily. But AI and AI tweaked videos and things like that, I thought was cool. And like I said, self-driving cars, they introduced that, and the ability for AI to potentially manipulate that was, I thought, an interesting storyline. And added to a bit of the horror. I mean, that was like the one kill in this movie. I mean, they make it seem like there was a kill at the beginning of the movie, but those people ended up showing up later as a part of this army of people that are essentially under the control of AI. But I liked how they did that with the oldest daughter, the middle son, Preston. You know, they delved into the idea of children being introduced to things that are beyond their years and not in a good way. Courtesy of AI, the younger child, Cal, we have him, you know, the AI diagnosing him, finding out he has AFib. But then we see Cal kind of going down a path that's emulated through the fact that he's listening to the same song and watching the same video that the little girl at the beginning of the movie. And we could see, you know, how he might be in a situation where AI is going to use him to manipulate Curtis and Meredith, maybe sometime in the future. So I found it really interesting how they use this AI, this Aya, and you know, they did essentially what you get in any of these killer AI movies, is the fact that AI comes across as a very helpful tool, and then it becomes invasive, and then you should start fearing it because it's trying to take over your life in one form or fashion. We've seen this all before, but I thought it was done in an interesting enough way, in a different enough way, in a way that kind of pertained to real world concerns that we have, you know, in regards to AI these days. Now, when this is marketed as a horror film, and it certainly has its horror moments, it definitely is more of a thriller. It does have some horror moments. You have a couple jump scares. There was a dream sequence that had some scary moments. A couple of those big jump scares there. It also really delved into creating a lot of atmosphere and a lot of tension. There were some creepy scenes where, like, I'm feeling myself tensing up in my movie theater chair, and you know, a lot of those scenes at night where you see shadows against the wall, that was kind of creepy. When Curtis goes outside and you've got that RV parked out on their street and those people outside, the person outside making those weird hand gestures that we see Cal doing later. And then finally we get an understanding of what those hand gestures mean when we get the mid-credit scene, which was kind of interesting and introduced you to the bigger picture of this AI and what it's doing. But while it lacked in like real horror, real scares, it did have some creepy moments. It did have some tense moments. It did have a bit of an atmosphere to it in a lot of scenes. So while it's not a horror in the purest sense, like I said, there's only one real kill in this. I take that back. David Dastmalchian gets shot. That really wasn't for horror effect. But you had one really good horror kill with the boyfriend of Iris. But other than that, yeah, it really was all atmosphere and tension, which I thought was done to good effect for the most part of this movie. That creeping anxiety of understanding just how vast this AI has taken over, not just their lives, but the lives of other, when you find out that there's just essentially like an army of people at the behest of AI. And I think that speaks to the bigger message of this movie. But I thought it was really good from a thriller or a horror thriller aspect. It didn't really delve into the horror as much as I wished it would have, but we've seen that. We saw that with Megan. We saw killer robots. We've seen killer AI. This story wasn't so much about AI killing anybody. This story was more about AI taking over everybody in maybe not so good ways, you know, beneficial, adverse, you know, it's a fine line between AI helping and doing things for good, and a thin line between that and AI doing things that are horrible. In some of the beginning credits, you see some of these lines that are taken directly from AI, telling people to kill themselves and saying horrible, you know, racist things and all this horrible stuff that AI can do and say and introduce kids to, and what sort of thoughts are AI, you know, exposing children to. I mean, there's a lot to be said about that. And I think this movie, it's trying to say that above just making AI some scary monster that might kill you. It's out to get you. It's like the boogeyman under your bed trying to grab your feet as you're jumping in. I think a lot of the other movies tried to make AI into that. And they did that through having AI be a part of some robotic thing, where this isn't a robot trying to chase you down like the fucking Terminator. This is AI doing what AI does and infiltrating your life, manipulating your life, and then making you essentially subservient to it. And I think that, to me, is the real essence of this movie. And it wasn't what I expected. I thought it was going to be more of a traditional AI gone bad. It's going to find some way to start killing people, whether it be, I knew it wasn't going to be like Tim or like Megan, but I thought it could be more like that episode of Black Mirror. I keep referring it to just as that episode because I can't for the life of me think of the name of the episode, but it was on the latest season of Black Mirror. If you haven't checked it out, if you did, you know what I'm talking about. But there was an aspect of this movie that I actually enjoyed because it wasn't quite like a lot of the other killer AI movies that we've seen as of late. It was more about the complexity of AI. And yes, AI can be a tool. AI can be very helpful. I was resistant to AI. As working in advertising, it drives me nuts when I see a client of the radio station I work at. I've got a script for you to use, and I look at it, and I can tell right away that they use ChatGTP to create this script, and it's usually pretty dreadful, full of nothing but cliches and stilted dialogue and the use of sound effects that, how do you make the sound of this? It's, you can always tell as a former copywriter, now a production director, you can always tell when a client has used AI to create a script. But there are instances, and I've used AI to a degree, not to create scripts, but in other aspects of my life where, I have a specific question. I'm just having a hard time finding the right answer online, and I'll ask ChatGTP. And, as far as I know, the answer's correct. I'm not asking about history because I know that can be skewed, but at any rate, I've used ChatGTP and other AI, and it can be a useful tool. And this movie kind of makes that point, but it also makes the point that AI can take over your life. When you start relying on AI and it becomes invasive and you're using it in every aspect of your life, you can't Google anything with seeing some AI result above all the other results from other websites that you're going to get. Meta is constantly trying to get me to use AI for this, that, or the other thing. And AI, whether we like it or not, is going to be taking over our daily life. There's probably going to be not very many aspects of our daily life that AI isn't going to be involved in some form or fashion in the not too distant future. And this movie kind of leans into that and makes that point. And then, of course, there's a lot of AI fear mongering right now, but it's not without plausible cause, because you have instances where AI can say things that are horrible. And that may be just, lesser versions of AI where it's just algorithms and it's just predictive text and it's telling you what it thinks you want to hear. It could be that, but there have been a lot of instances where AI has said some awful things to people. And when it's saying that sort of stuff to children and corrupting our children and introducing children to things that they don't need to be introduced to, at any age, let alone in those formative years of childhood, it can be quite scary when AI gets to the point where it's going to be taking over, daily tasks that you find too menial to do yourself, paying bills and stuff like that. When you rely on AI, what happens when that AI maybe not goes bad in the way that this movie did, but AI screws up? And what happens to your life then when, you have no money because AI did something? I don't know. It just opened up a lot of of doors to questions that I think people are asking right now, and gives us the possible answers, or at least an answer of how things could go. And at the very end, in a lot of these other AI versus humanity movies and TV shows, you have a sense that the good guys win. But there's always that faint glimmer of, but AI is still out there. It's maybe gone, but it's not gone for good. There could be a sequel. Whereas this, they didn't even fuck around with doing the happy ending. AI is essentially stopped, but they right away let you know that this AI, this Aya, has complete control. It's everywhere. It's not going anywhere. It's maybe not necessarily malevolent because it's always learning. And there's a commentary about it learning from the internet, and that's where it got all its information. But it's learning through interacting with people, and how it's not going anywhere, and it is in every facet of their life. The EMT, the cops, they're all doing whatever this AI wants, because this AI is everywhere. This AI is influencing everything. And I think that's not necessarily a message for this movie, but a bigger message about where AI is. AI is painted as a monster, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's a monster that's been let out of the cage, and it can't be put back in. And it is going to be a part of our lives, a sometimes necessary tool, but also other times it is the monster lurking in the dark places. And the end of this movie, really, that's what it said to me. That's what it spoke to me, is AI is not going anywhere. AI is everywhere, and we have to find some way to deal with that. So to me, that's the message I got from this movie. And I think that's why I liked it so much, because it really looked at AI as not a monster that can be vanquished. It looked at AI as something, a monster of our own creation that can be used for good. AI can do good things, but also AI can do some very dark things. And how do we reconcile ourselves to that? We've created this monster, we've created this entity, be it for good or ill, and how do we deal with that now that the cat's out of the bag? To me, that's really good writing. That's really good storytelling. I was pleased to see that Chris Weitz wrote and directed this. If you're not familiar with Chris Weitz, he wrote and directed a couple movies. One movie I didn't see, The Golden Compass, that had some sketchy reviews. A movie I think I saw, but I didn't care for. He directed Twilight New Moon. It was in that time of my life where Twilight was all over every place. I was like, I'm going to see what this is. I think that might have been the last Twilight movie I watched. I was like, nah, this isn't the kind of vampires and werewolves I want. But he also wrote Rogue One. He wrote the 2022 Disney's Pinocchio. He also wrote The Creator, which came out last year, one of my favorite sci-fi movies of 2023. He wrote that. And of course, he's directed some, he's written some, and the guy knows how to tell stories and is really good at that. And there's a lot of other movies he's done that I haven't watched that I've always wanted to see. Operation Finale is one of those. I've always wanted to watch that. I haven't. But an excellent director, excellent writer, and you could tell that this movie had somebody that knew what they were doing as far as storytelling at the wheel of this movie. And that's one of the things I really appreciated. And from an aesthetic standpoint, there wasn't a lot of CG. There wasn't a lot of special effects. It was just a very simple movie that I thought looked good. It created atmosphere. It created tension. It created all of that around a family that you cared about. And they made you care about this family right away because they're such a sweet family full of good people. And, that's the hallmark of good writing and good storytelling when characters are created that you care about right away. And that just raises the stakes, and this movie did that, and I quite enjoyed it. From an acting standpoint, writing and directing, it looked good. You know, there were a lot of scenes at night that I thought were shot really well. They had some interesting shots that I thought helped add to the uneasiness of this story. I like the little side story of this quote-unquote company that is run by David Smallchain's Lightning and the other character. I can't remember the name of the character, but played by Ashley Romans. But I really liked that little story of Curtis going to the offices of the creators of Aya, and it really created a mystery. I thought that was really interesting. I don't know whether that played out as succinctly and coherently as they hoped. You know, you got that mid-credit scene where it's almost like an advertisement, well, not an advertisement, but it's like, you know, some kid doing an unboxing video, and it showed that these hand signals are ways that you can do these, you know, hand gestures, and your AI is going to be able to sense those hand gestures and do whatever, take a selfie or watch a video or what have you. It was odd to see these hand gestures. I thought it might have a bigger meaning, but it did kind of play into the sense of this AI going from, you know, working with this one family and learning from it to like globally taking over. That was interesting. I liked that little B plot to this, that little subplot that added to mystery and was quite interesting in a bizarre way. And so much of this movie was interesting in a bizarre way, and I think that's why I liked it so much. Not the greatest movie of the year, not my favorite movie of the year. Don't get me wrong, this movie wasn't without some faults, but they were minor. And it wasn't a very long movie. It was like an hour and 24 minutes, which had me concerned. I thought, okay, this is either going to be a movie that's tight and right and bang, 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 or it's going to be a situation where this like could have been an hour-long episode of something, and they just filled out 24 more minutes just to get it there. And I don't think it felt like either. I think it did feel like it didn't wear out its welcome. I never felt bored at any point, and it didn't feel like they just had it with filler. I think they edited it down to where it needed to be. Maybe it could have been tightened up a little bit more, maybe cut a couple minutes out, but you know, like I said, that would be if I were nitpicking. And to me, the length felt good. This movie worked for me. Not my favorite movie of the year, not a great movie, but it was a pretty good movie, and I quite enjoyed it. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on Afraid. Not a scary horror film. The name doesn't really do the film justice, because you're not going to be afraid during this unless you are thinking about AI and our dark AI overlords and the fact that they're probably going to take over any minute now. That could get you afraid. Maybe that's the fear they're looking for. Maybe that's the afraid that is in the title. That's the titular afraid, is how afraid we should be of how invasive AI is becoming and how much it is going to take over. Maybe I just realized the whole point of this. But at any rate, not a scary movie, but in the bigger sense, maybe we should be a little more scared. Maybe we should be afraid. Be very afraid. So I want to thank everyone for listening to my thoughts on Afraid. You can check out more of what's going on with Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe on our social media pages, Facebook and Instagram. We're always posting about horror, fantasy, and science fiction. Please, wherever you listen to this podcast, like, follow, subscribe to it. That way you can stay on top of all the latest episodes and what we've going on. Please leave those reviews. 5 stars would be awesome, but whatever review you leave, we do appreciate that. And as always, please share this podcast with anyone that you know that loves horror, fantasy, and science fiction. So until next time.